So we've all heard of high IQ, but have you ever heard of high EQ? Emotional intelligence. Psychology today defines emotional intelligence as the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. Now, it sounds like the ideal relationship. Don't we all want a relationship with an emotionally intelligent person? But are you sure you're ready for it? Because these types of relationships will challenge you in the most wonderful of ways.
Welcome to a new paradigm, a new way of being, free from shame, self-limitation, or cultural programming. Welcome to a new you, a new world full of endless possibilities. Welcome to your Tantric awakening.
Welcome to the Tantric Awakening podcast. I'm Andre Knight.
And I'm Kendall.
And today we're going to talk all about emotional intelligence. Now, from the introduction, it sounds like this would be the perfect ideal partner and the perfect ideal relationship. Why wouldn't everybody want that? Well, you see, the thing with a perfect mirror, and that's what our partners tend to be, the ones that are worth keeping, they tend to be really good mirrors. The thing with a perfect mirror is it's going to reveal everything that you've been hiding from yourself. And not everybody's perhaps ready for that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an initiation to lean into these parts of ourselves that require us to be vulnerable and to be authentic with ourselves, right? It's a courageous path to lean into what is emotional intelligence and even to acknowledge if you are, for example, emotionally immature. Like, to get to that self-realization is a very intimate journey, and one that if you choose to lean into, it can really profoundly shift your entire life.
Oh, absolutely. And generally for the better. But the getting there can sometimes be less than pleasant. It depends. It really depends how much you've been hiding from yourself, because being emotionally raw, being emotionally vulnerable, being authentic with another can be very, very difficult. It can be even more difficult sometimes to be emotionally raw and vulnerable and authentic with yourself. Yeah. So in the introduction, going by the definition from Psychology Today, they specifically speak into EQ being the ability to manage your emotions in positive ways, to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. And we're going to take these one by one and dive into them. Before we do, let's maybe look at the root causes of emotional immaturity. That might be a good place to start. And I know from some of your reading on the subject, you were telling me that oftentimes the cause of emotional immaturity can be the result of being spoiled as a child, also coming from a place of privilege. And oftentimes, to create that privilege, parents have to work hard and therefore be absent a lot, which is why oftentimes they're overcompensating for the lack of their own emotional connection to you and emotional depth. They compensate with gifts and with presents. And this is where a lot of times this, feeling of being spoiled can come from, right?
Yeah, it's definitely big part of my journey personally as a woman because I very much grew up in the middle class, very much privileged. I very much knew my life. My parents was very connected to full-time jobs. There was dedication to their work. Yet there was parts of me that as a young teenager, even as a young adult, that was wondering if there was something deeper that I was not tapping into. And so, yeah, this is definitely a very personal topic for me, because I will be the first to admit that a big part of my journey has been in recognizing where I've been emotionally immature. And what I mean by that in a deeper way is just not having the tools and how to go deep with people. Because for me, I can personally say a lot of my expressions for most of my younger years into my teen years, and even into like college years, the way I expressed myself was mainly through dancing. So a big part of my journey has been really learning how to understand the deeper aspects of the human experience, which is coming to appreciate what is emotional intelligence as it relates to the body, more so than just like, oh, I'm a dancer, right? The journey itself has led me to understand what is the nervous system, which I feel like is the foundation of what is emotional health, right? When we're able to understand why our bodies go through certain responses and how to actually move through responses. So this has been an initiation for me in such deep ways, especially in our divine union. And I've also want to share as well that I feel, because we're talking about emotional maturity, I think the other side of that coin is also recognizing the emotional immaturity and where that comes from, because I do feel like this is not just an individual systemic issue. This is like a global issue for many humans right now. And I think this is why we're seeing a lot of emotional immaturity from leaders. And this is why there's so much of what we're seeing right now in the news and people standing up for each other. It's because like these emotionally mature responses from people are rising up. I think of like the French Revolution. It was recognizing that until all of us are free, none of us are really free, right? Because we're all connected. So yeah, there's so many layers to this.
Absolutely. It's very much a societal thing. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations wrote that the wealth, the prosperity of any nation can only be measured by the welfare of its poorest citizen. Not by GDP, not by total output, none of those factors, but the well-being of the welfare of its poorest citizen. And I mean, you grew up in the United States, you grew up in the middle class. My background was entirely different. I grew up in Russia for the first half of my childhood. I was an immigrant, the son of immigrants. We came to this country with almost nothing, but a lot of the same themes were prevalent. My dad got called off to military service when my mom was pregnant. I didn't really know him for the first couple of years of my life. I knew him from recordings of stories that he sent me. That was his way of compensating for not being able to be there. And then when we came into this country, I mean, I'm grateful to my dad. He provided. He was a hard worker, but the cost of him providing was him not being there, except, he'd show up for dinner and then I'd have him for an hour or two to maybe ask for help with my homework before either he got tired or I got tired. It was always kind of functional, except, when we took days off, we'd take days off to go to the park or took a vacation at Disneyland once. I remember that. There were intentional time we took for family time, but other than that, the interactions were kind of functional. Do you need any help with your homework, son? Do you know, that type of thing. Not that that was bad necessarily. I mean, I felt very loved growing up as a child, but there was definitely like compensation. Definitely. Television is another one when parents can't be around. Like for me, it was television, which I guess in a way, part of what sparked my curiosity in so many different topics. I was always a curious kid. I watched a lot of documentaries and specials as opposed to, necessarily just movies and sports. But that was the de facto babysitter. We're not available, so let's stick them in front of the TV for a little while. Emotional maturity was really, relationship, I would say, is one of the best teachers for emotional maturity. Because either you learn it or the relationship self-destructs. Any relationship, by the way, it need not be romantic. How you relate to your peers, how you relate to your neighbors, how you relate to your coworkers are all opportunities to show either emotional maturity or emotional immaturity. Maybe let's compare and contrast those so people get an idea of what we're talking about. Emotional immaturity can manifest as having no control of your emotions, having no awareness of your emotions. A lot of times people aren't aware, simply are not aware of how they're behaving in public till somebody pulls them aside and tells them. Versus emotional maturity, emotional intelligence is being aware. Being aware of what you're feeling, being aware of how it affects others. And also yourself. I would say that's a big difference that stands out for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do any examples come to mind for you of like emotional immaturity versus maturity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel with emotional immaturity, in my own personal experiences with myself, it's usually because I've had stories attached to my emotions. And so I've allowed myself to let the story lead me. And usually it's my mind that's leading, and I'm not leading from my heart. And somehow I've pointed the fingers at others. I've even done this with you and in a relationship where I've pointed my finger at you, realizing that my mind created the story to essentially like support the uncomfortability that was present with the emotion. And at the core of it, I've recognized it's because of perhaps the fear of being seen, or not even just being seen by another, but seeing yourself and admitting to yourself, oh man, I am really projecting upon you or judging you. And so, yeah, the emotional immature moments I've had in life have been really about projection or judging. And the biggest growth and empowerment for me in that to go into emotional maturity is just purely to take accountability. And also, interestingly enough, for me personally, my journey has been allowing myself to receive feedback. Because I feel like emotional immaturity can be a defending and not being open to receive feedback. And I also feel like this is tied to the neuroplasticity that comes from being able to connect with people that are different from you. So it's also, I feel like, the critical thinking aspect of the brain, where if you are more closed off in the brain to the other and difference, there's the amygdala starts to fire. And so a big part of me in learning emotional maturity in my journey has been really acknowledging where in the feeling of disconnection, for example, where am I trying to defend myself, or where am I feeling fear in the body? And oftentimes, especially in my journey of leaving religion, it's been in, just recognizing those fears within, outside in, and just reclaiming my power.
Well, you touched on a couple important points there. First of all, yes, neurons that fire together tend to wire together. So you're very correct in that. Very often we lead with an emotion. We might not even be aware of why we're feeling that emotion. And if you're empathic, it may not even be your emotion. You might have picked it up somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're feeling an emotion. It might not have anything to do with your partner. You could be worried about your exams tomorrow, a bill due tomorrow, the fact that your car was making a strange sound on the way home. It could be any number of things, but you are feeling fear. But then you're going to project that fear onto the person you're interacting with. And then your brain is going to come up with a story to justify the emotion you're already feeling. And 9 out of 10 times, you're going to make it about the person you're interacting with. And that's where the projection comes in. So that is exactly, you've identified the pattern, you've identified the cycle. And then you add neuroplasticity to the mix. And if you're constantly defaulting to fear, or you're constantly defaulting to anger to compensate for the fear, right? Behind every bully is somebody who's deeply afraid. Right? Anger is a compensation for fear.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly doing that, you're going to wire those neurons together, and being angry very soon is going to feel like your new normal. Whereas before it took like a stimulus of 6 to get you to an 8, pretty soon a stimulus of 1 will get you to the same 8, because you're just so used to being at 8, you're not even feeling like you're angry till you get to a 10. 8 suddenly is your normal. And that is the kind of the real danger, where we start to almost function on autopilot without much conscious choice. So emotional intelligence is the opposite of that. And that's why I call emotional intelligence a form of empowerment. Because through awareness, rather than acting on reflex, you're giving yourself a choice, right? And when you give yourself a choice where there was no choice before, that is the very definition of empowerment. It's the opposite of running on autopilot. Now you get to choose your responses because you're aware of the stimuli and you're aware of your reactions to them. And that's what I would define as empowerment.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's been a journey for sure. And I can even think about what has been empowering for me in understanding my emotions has the wave of self-compassion that's come from it, and also recognizing where in my life perhaps where I didn't feel safe enough to express all emotions. And that was a big part of my journey. And I think it's a lot of people's journey, especially women. For example, a big part of my journey, especially growing up, yes, I was able to express myself through dancing. Yet because I was in this like Christian woman arena, and there was always this like appropriate way to act projected onto me. For example, in the Proverbs 31 woman, it describes what is acceptable behavior. Yeah. A big part of my journey was really a devotee of that. Like I devoted myself years and years and years to become this Proverbs 31 woman. And when I read it and even embodying it at one point to very much a T, like anger was not part of that. There were certain emotions that I really wasn't given permission to lean into. So when I discovered in my awakening journey, for example, the wild woman, and I studied this archetype and read The Woman Who Ran with the Wolves book, for example, something started to awaken in me. And then that's when I realized, for example, the liver, for example, where anger develops from, I started to recognize that I had been suppressing certain emotions to people please. And so it's been interesting, this journey, because I feel on the path of awakening, especially right now. Like, I feel this collective, especially in the unconscious, becoming conscious, like people's suppressed emotions are coming to the surface. And it's not to say like, oh, bad, like labeling something as good or bad, but the emotionally intelligent way of moving through and acknowledging these emotions is, like you mentioned, creating that space to make a choice and have the regulation tools in place. So if, for example, you are triggered and anger starts to come up, what do you do in that moment? And that's where I have various tools that have come to be very helpful, I would say.
Well, it's interesting because, yeah, women have a fear of using their voice, being judged, being thought too much. There was a time being thought to be too intelligent was a bad thing, right? Men grow up with this too. We're taught to suppress our emotions, right? If you show your emotions, you're a sissy, you're a wimp, you're not man enough, right? So it's different, but we both genders very much suffer from the same thing. It's almost like we're taught from childhood that being aware of and expressing your emotions is somehow a bad thing. And then later on, when we grow up and mature and get in a relationship, we have to unlearn a lot of that programming. Well, let's talk about this, because managing our emotions is a big part of it. So it starts with relieving stress, right? The tools that come to mind for me right away: breath work, maybe taking some space if you need it, talking it out. You know, you and I have a habit, if we ever have any kind of disagreement, we don't like to go to bed angry. You know, if it involves staying up a little bit later, but talking it out, finding our way back to love. You know, the day needs closure. The event needs closure. We don't kind of let it fester and simmer. And so taking space, yes, but then coming back together to talk it out, and then integration, because by talking about it, there's integration. By storming off, by avoiding the topic, you're almost preventing that integration. So the wound doesn't have a chance to heal. It stays open. And any wound that stays open, what does it do? It starts to fester. It gets infected. So those are some of the tools that come to mind for me, like when I'm feeling angry. Do some breath work, step away, come back when you're ready, talk, and then integrate. What are some of your favorite tools?
Yeah. Yeah, it really depends on the moment. Yes to all of that. I would absolutely say, for me, it's movement of any kind. Dancing, taking a walk, like, especially if it's an intense emotion, I will experience and react differently to joy, right, than I do in like frustration or anger. When I'm feeling those more, not that I'm trying to label those more intense emotions, because emotions are messengers, but yeah, I'll dance, I will move my body, I will walk sometimes. And this is because of the background in like arts, is just using facial expressions, like like that's why we use our faces to express. I would even say writing is a really good practice, and even this book that has been really helpful for me in my journey, I've had it for years, but it talks about writing as a form of helping the brain come back online in those moments when you have these emotions come up. So it's really interesting, because it talks about how when you are amongst children, for example, you know, you're just mentioning what are the tools you would use. I think about, even as a teacher of young kids, for example, I go back to the innocence of being like a child, because when we are children, there is a very much a authenticity that I feel sometimes it's maybe there's more blocks or resistance from adults. And what I mean by that is that children are very honest in that they'll express their emotions, and sometimes they'll just blurb them out. Their words and their emotions are very felt. And what I have learned is like, yes, I can, what I've personally done with the inner child or the child outside myself is really creating the safety for acknowledging such emotion as a teacher, for example, being like a parent in ways, is I acknowledge the emotion. I acknowledge that the emotion is present. I usually get to the level of where the person is, and usually they're like young, and I will say their name and be like, yeah, tell me a little bit more, like what happened, just talking them through it. And usually as they share it, they're feeling their feelings right there. Like they're sad, they're crying, and they're feeling it. And what I provide is co-regulation. I model like, it's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel sad. Like, I've had students that have lost their family members or they're grieving, like, and it's tough. Or Billy said something mean to little Johnny and Johnny's feeling bad. And, I've witnessed kids bully each other and have to like hold space. And what I've learned is with children, they're great teachers for us as adults, is that the best thing you can do is feel your feelings, but do it in a way that is loving to yourself and offers yourself compassion. And so sometimes it does take reflecting back to a student of like, take all the time you need. I've had a student literally sit out because they were just not having it. They were feeling so many emotions. And I just encourage them, you don't have to participate, but your presence is very welcome just the way you are. And usually in those moments, the students will join the class. But yeah, that's some examples I have.
You bring up an important point, though, the importance of staying in your center, right? Because if somebody comes at you with fire, I like to sort emotions into elements. And this is something I learned early on in my martial arts training, actually. Because you judge how a person's coming at you by their body posture, by the speed they're approaching you. Are they watery? Are they stubborn and strong and earth-like? Are they fiery and really aggressive? Are they kind of aloof and windy? The same can be applied for emotions. So if somebody's coming at you with a lot of fire and you retort back to them with a lot of fire, what are you doing? Now you've got a blaze, right? That's not very helpful. But recognizing when somebody's in fire and maybe giving them a little calming, cooling earth or a little soothing water might be just the thing. So it's, yes, they're feeling this way, but no, I don't have to match them. I can be so strong in my presence that I can help bring them back to calm or help bring them back to love, right? And what you also said about holding space, this is a tricky one, particularly for men. And honestly, it didn't come naturally. I had to learn this one. You've been a very good teacher for this. And I don't want to say men because it's not necessarily tied to gender, but when you're in your masculine energy, the instinct is always to fix the problem. What's wrong, right? You can probably say, as a woman, probably the most annoying question when you're upset, what's wrong? Why are you feeling this way? Like, put it into words, give me a definition, right? And tell me how to fix it. When in reality, sometimes you just have to feel it, to move it, to process it, to integrate it. And you just want somebody to hold space for you, to witness you. Sometimes maybe to leave and give you space, but sometimes to witness you and hold space. You're not necessarily looking for Mr. Fix-It in that moment. So I had to learn not to try to fix it. And a really good practice here, ask the person what they need. I like to think I've been better at that. Would you like me to leave and give you some space? Would you like me to hold space for you silently? Would you like a hug? What do you need in this moment?
Mm.
Ask. Just like you would in a romantic act, right? You wouldn't approach somebody without asking their consent. Don't approach somebody with your solutions, no matter how good you feel they are, without first asking for consent. What do you need in this moment? Because it's not for me to decide what you need. What do you need in this moment? And particularly when offering advice. Hey, I might be able to contribute something here. Are you open to a little feedback? Are you open to some advice? And you might say, yeah, I would love that. You might say, no, not right now. Just hold me, you know? These are things you learn. You kind of learn through trial and error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this reminds me of the words together, self-advocacy, and the importance of that, because I feel the journey of emotional intelligence and emotional maturity is one of mirroring. I think a lot of people, I'm a millennial, for example, and I think a lot of millennial parents and even various people from different generations didn't have proper mirroring in what is emotional intelligence. And without that mirroring, we aren't able to regulate ourselves and essentially offer what you just reflected. What do you need? Like asking those questions. How can I support you right now? The empowered self-regulation aspect of that other mirroring, which you were just offering, is being able to ask yourself these deeper questions. How am I feeling at any moment? What do I need right now? It's just like this in the intuition, for example, hunger. Let's lean into hunger, for example. This is interesting. Taking a step back. If we as a collective were not told, for example, or let me phrase it in a different way. How many of you, for example, have been taught that 3 meals a day is the way? Right? I know for as long as I can remember, like 3 meals has been the main way to digest or eat, right? Yet, how I've been unraveling that is understanding intuition, understanding the gut instinct, understanding when I am hungry is when I feel in my body like my body needs some nutrients. And granted, like I understand it's important to, eat, make sure your metabolism's good in the morning, that sort of thing. But I guess what I'm trying to say as well is the same energy that goes behind the intuition to eat, I think is also a muscle, for example, that is emotional intelligence, which is at any time being able to be mindful with yourself, right? Because I feel the opposite of emotional intelligence is emotional immaturity. And what immaturity, I feel, not only from my own experience and having to learn and grow in this, but observing other people in the emotional immature space, is usually it's a lack of mindfulness. And like you were mentioning earlier, compensating for a lack of emotional presence is the issue. It is truly an issue in what you were mentioning about your upbringing of like your parents being providers, but also there was, I could feel it even as you were sharing, like there was perhaps this longing to go deeper, to feel your feelings perhaps with your father, which is so beautiful. And yet it's like, it's understandable because overall I feel like there's a lack of that modeling, fathers to sons. And I think that's why even we're seeing now in 2025, the reality, the response to the lack of emotional intelligence. And that's what I'm personally seeing. I'm seeing that there's been a lack of mirroring. There's been a lack of being seen, because when I'm with kids, if they're ever angry, it's usually because they're not being seen or respected.
Absolutely.
And when people don't feel safe or secure, and not even just feel safe and secure, but when they can't lean on a leader, or a leader is demonstrating from the ego that they don't really care about them, people's nervous systems are activated. And that's where it can lead into an overwhelm in the liver, where anger is developed. So,
Well, that's exactly it. That's why I said sometimes the most important gift you can give to a person is simply to witness them, which is, that's one of the 5 points that Psychology Today mentioned for emotional intelligence, empathy with others. Right? We talked about relaxation. Now you're touching upon empathizing with others. We've also touched a little bit, and we're going to go much deeper into communicating effectively. But this idea of putting words on your feelings, describing them. I am feeling this. I am feeling it in my stomach. I'm feeling it in my head. I'm feeling a heaviness on my heart. Putting words to it. And I really love your suggestion of writing.
Mm-hmm.
This is really important, you guys. Part of the reason writing is effective,
Mm-hmm.
try writing 2 words at the same time. Even if you're ambidextrous, 1 pen in each hand, you still will not be able to write 2 words simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas our brain, when we're in our heads, can go 1,000 miles a minute, right? And we feel overwhelmed. There's no way to do that with writing. Writing is like the great funnel that'll force you to structure your words and your sentences one at a time. And that's why it's so effective. I would also encourage you guys, if you're doing any kind of journaling, do it the old-fashioned analog way. Not on your phone, not on your computer, but pen or pencil in your hand. Okay? Because what actually happens, there's been a study done on this. When you're scraping, right? If you look at a piece of paper under a microscope, it's very rough. It's not smooth. And what happens with a pencil or a pen is that rough surface scrapes the ink or the graphite off the pen or pencil. That creates a vibration. That vibration travels up the shaft of the pen. That vibration travels through the bones of your fingers, up the bones of your arm, all the way up, through your nervous system into your brain, and it literally creates a state of brain entrainment. A lot of writers don't know what to write about when they start writing, but very soon you can barely keep up because you're entraining your brain and you're stimulating the imagination. Compare that with typing. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. That's almost the exact opposite. And plus you're looking at a screen that's actually a strobe light that's flashing into your eyeballs, 60 times a second, in some cases 120 times a second. It's doing the opposite of calming. It's creating anxiety. So the medium you write upon can make a huge difference as well.
Yeah. It reminds me of the sensitivity of sound and how ASMR, for example, is so helpful for so many people. It's helped me in moments where, like, even when I was healing around the feminine wound and the mother wound, like there's this woman online that literally talks like this. It's so fun. And I love ASMR. But
wow, I felt my nervous system shifting just in that brief moment.
yeah, it's being able to drop into the moment and really lean in. Yeah. And it provides your body the opportunity to receive, and essentially it activates your ventral vagus nerve. So this soothes and restores you to a feeling of safety after you have been challenged I like whispering. I love ASMR. And it's just, yeah, see, it's powerful. And I've honestly been leaning into doing more voice work. Perhaps doing this, but
I hope that you do. You sound amazing.
And even some erotic stuff too, because just in general, I've been told that my voice helps, inspires people and turns people on and as well. So, but anyways,
certainly turns me on.
I know. But yeah, the biggest thing that I wanted to mention as well is that, yeah, in response to all this, the social engagement nerve is what is necessary for emotional safety. Like, if we are going to become more emotionally intelligent people that walk this earth, that are helping others, and I know even in our union, like, this has been a focal point of our growth and just experiences. But yeah, I feel people more than ever deserve to feel safe and attuned, and amongst leaders who are from the heart and really understand these things that we've been talking about. What did you say?
Well, let's talk about navigating emotionally charged situations and diffusing conflict.
Okay.
Overcoming some of these challenges, because that is the other definite, going back to that definition, that is the other part of it. And I think what is true for resolving conflict in relationship, if it was practiced in business, if it was practiced in politics, we would find ourselves living in an entirely different world. Very, very quickly, in fact. The number one thing I would advise, and we'll speak into relationships because that's our primary area, but like, the number one advice I would give if you find yourselves feuding a lot as a couple, stop trying to win. Because if in any conflict where you have a winner, you must also therefore have a loser. And nobody likes to lose, which is what creates defensiveness. And when somebody's busy defending themselves, they're not listening to you anymore. They're trying to win, or in some cases trying to avoid losing. But the one thing they're not doing is listening. And pretty soon you have two people who aren't listening to each other because they're both trying to win. So rather than trying to win, what I encourage you to do is approach every conflict as a learning opportunity. Here's a chance to learn more about my partner. Here's a chance to learn more about myself. And approach it with a curiosity rather than this vigor to win. And what we're really delving into right now, it's called nonviolent communication, you guys. And I encourage you to Google that topic as well as emotional intelligence and, see what the old AI brings up to your conscious awareness as well. But nonviolent communication is really what we're getting at the core of. Violent communication besides tone. I mean, obviously looking menacing, threatening, raising your voice. Why do we raise our voice? We think we're not being heard. That ties right into the witnessing you spoke into. That's why we tend to raise our voice. If you don't want your partner raising your voice, look at them intently. Let them know you're listening. And that'll diffuse their need to raise their voice and escalate further. But the number one thing, I think, violence, tone aside, violent statements tend to start with you. You did this. You did that. You are this. You always is not good for relationships. You always do this. You always do that. Well, where's the capacity? Where's the room for the person to change? And even if they put in the effort, would you really believe they change? So why bother? Always is a very damning and condemning word, right? So you statements tend to be violent. If you want to communicate non-violently, besides being aware of your tone, like you gave us the brilliant example, I statements. Speak into what you're feeling. Not the other person, you. I. I feel this because of this. Because what you're speaking into now is an area that you're an expert in. You are the world's greatest expert on you. So you're qualified to make I statements. You're not as qualified to make you statements because you're making assumptions about the other person that may or may not be correct. So speak into the I, what you're feeling, where you're feeling it, why you're feeling it. And then let the other person speak into what they're feeling, what they're an expert in. Don't try to be an expert on them, be an expert on you. And then let them be an expert on them and speak into their feelings. And what do you have now? You have two people that understand each other better and deeper, rather than two people trying to win a conflict or a competition. See the difference?
Yeah, I definitely see the difference. And I think it's also important to recognize that the more you practice this and the more you take accountability for how you're feeling and expressing that, I think it also generates more trust and safety within the relationship. So regardless of whatever your attachment style is, whether you're anxious or avoidant, or what's the other one again? The attachment style?
Well,
There's the
anxious and avoidant are
yeah.
the two axes of the scale, but they can be near each other, anxious, avoidant, or they can be apart.
Yeah. There's, and also the secure.
Person can be distant or disassociative, and a person can also be preoccupied.
Yes, all those other ones. I think the more you can, just be attuned and take accountability for yourself and own your part and just express, I am feeling this because, like, for example, I felt uncomfortable when you said this. It made me feel contracted. It made me feel unsafe. That's an example, right? How would you respond to something like that?
Well, you said it. That's something to be really aware of, contraction versus expansion, right? Do you feel your body and your nervous system contracting? That's usually a sign of feeling unsafe.
Yeah.
If you feel yourself expanding or the lack of contraction, usually that means that trust is being built and you feel safe. So you said it, trust. Trust is a very, very big component of this.
How would you respond to that? Just to model back, like, in saying that.
Well, here's the thing. You said it really well. When I said this or when I did this, it made you feel this. Recognize that this is a two-step process. You could be with someone who's being the biggest jerk, the biggest asshole in the world, but your feelings are still not their fault. They're acting as they will. The second part of the choice is how you choose to react to how they're acting. In the end, you're still the one choosing to feel this way, or sometimes by reflex, by lack of choice, conscious choice. There's the stimulus, and you may not always have control of the stimulus. But emotional intelligence is about being in control of the response and realizing you're in control of the response.
Yeah. So,
I've seen very effectively somebody, like in public, in interviews, somebody acting like a total belligerent asshole, and the other person meets them with humor and totally diffuses the situation and really makes them look like a much bigger ass. You know, kind of lets them hang themselves without the other person having to get worked up and confrontational at all.
Yeah. So, like,
just realize your response, no matter how good or bad a person's acting, realize that your reaction to them is your responsibility.
Well, I was just even giving you the example, and that's why I was requesting, what would you respond to what I said as a reflection to the audience? I think that would be wonderful for them.
So specifically to your example.
Yes.
When I said this, it made you feel this.
Yeah, what would you say in response?
Oh, I didn't realize you felt that way. Unless I'm deliberately trying to hurt the person, which, why are you in a relationship with somebody who's deliberately trying to hurt you, right? More often than not, somebody's hurting you without being aware that their actions or words are hurting you. Oh, thank you for bringing that to my awareness. I was not aware of that, right? Thank you for bringing that to my awareness. I didn't realize my behavior was making you feel that way. the last thing I would want to do is make you feel that way. Please realize I was doing that without being aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Though I do have to say, you could have maybe brought it to my attention in a little bit of a softer way, because the aggressiveness which you had in your voice, which I understand, if that's how you were feeling, that aggressiveness made me feel unsafe and made me start to feel a little defensive.
Did you feel
so
that
you
when
see
I
what I did? I took ownership. First of all, I made you aware that I was not doing it intentionally, because that's the first thing. You want to make the person know that that was not your intent. Second of all, I didn't deflect or defend. I took ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I apologized. And I thanked you, actually. How dare you say that? No. Thank you for bringing that to my awareness.
No, it's wonderful.
And then I started speaking into my feelings. At no time did I invalidate your feelings. Oh, you're too much. You're just too sensitive. What are you effectively saying? You have no right to feel that way. What am I, the emotional police? You have a right to feel whatever you're feeling. It's not my place to judge whether your emotions are appropriate or not. I'm here to acknowledge that you felt that way,
Mm-hmm.
take ownership, and apologize if I had a hand in creating those emotions. And then what did I do? I started speaking into my emotions, not calling yours right or wrong. I acknowledged yours. And if there was some hurt on my end, I can then speak into my emotions. Notice I was using I statements, speaking about my feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's great. I prompted that so we can model that for everyone as an example. And I also wanted to express as well, it's very important to recognize, in the whole winning too, because if you're wanting to go deeper into emotional intelligence, is recognizing that it requires your raw authenticity, in that you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to see yourself in another, and it's a call to rise. And I think it's important as well to recognize, and I think this has been a big part of my own self-reflection, and I think just in general, but recognizing expressing yourself, your feelings, is also not needing to be identified as a personal attack. And I think that's really important as well, that I've noticed, and just in light of this emotional intelligence conversation, is the more you are aware of yourself and can own it and express that to another, it's like recognize that in the honesty, we are essentially moving the energy to help co-regulate, and not only regulate, but extend love and compassion. And I think that's just another point I wanted to mention as well to this conversation, because I feel like the whole winning thing can come from this like Mars energy that's like, oh, this is a personal attack, or oh, this is, there's a lack of Venusian energy. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that because of my astrology background. It's just a reminder that emotional intelligence is finding that dance. It is a dance between, yes, understanding boundaries and expressing yourself through voice, and also just being sensitive to reading the room, right? Reading the person, reading their body language. It's an art. I mean, emotional intelligence is an art form.
Not taking things personally is a learned skill. I know early on in our relationship, I'll be vulnerable and real here, I took everything personally. There may have been things, emotions that were carryovers from your experience with the church or leaving the church. There may have been emotions that were carryovers from your experiences with your family or leaving your family. But I took everything personally. And no wonder it hurt so much. If I took everything as a personal attack, of course it hurt, And then the other side of it, what you mentioned, like these are practiced skills, you guys, right? So don't go for perfection, and don't think your relationship is horrible if one partner or the other messes up, right? Practice, right? This is about, you taught me this phrase. This is about practice and progress, not perfection, right? And every time you mess up, it's an opportunity for awareness and it's an opportunity for practice. And while you're in this learning stage, one thing that's really helpful, you've gotten really better about this, and I'm trying to be better about this. Honey, it's not you. I'm upset because of something that happened at work. I'm upset because I'm worried about, like, we literally tell each other, just so you know, it's not you. I'm feeling this and this, but it's not you. So the person will learn over time not to take it personally. But in the beginning, if you think of it, if you remember in the moment, reassure them. And by the same token, if it is them, back to the nonviolent communication, when you do this, it makes me feel this. As long as we're modeling nonviolent communication, by the way, another one that comes up for me, just like the you always do this, you always do that. Another word that I've been personally working really hard on eliminating from my vocabulary, and we've been pretty good at catching each other. When we use it, the word should. I really can't think of a useful use scenario for the word should, like ever. If you're telling somebody you should do this, or you shouldn't do this, that's violent communication in a way. And much more subtle is when we say it to ourselves. Oh, I should have done this. I should do this. It's just a very controlling, oppressive word. And the nonviolent form of this would look like, how would it feel if we blank, blank, blank? Have you ever considered doing it this way? How would it feel if you tried doing it this way? You see how this is more of an invitation and a question rather than a command.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes back to self-talk. How do you dialogue with yourself? Because I believe truly emotional immaturity is only strengthened when we don't take inventory of how our mind is generating our thoughts and how we're not mindful of this. And so, yeah, I really believe how you talk to yourself, how you talk to your inner parts, your inner child, your inner teen, your inner adults, or whatever archetypes you work with, like my inner queen, for example, or my inner priestess. Like, all these are dialogues and conversations. And the more attuned you are to these parts of yourself, the more you can show up as an emotionally stable and secure person. And honestly, like, the journey of even relationship to myself and even in relationship with you has been recognizing, like, I appreciate so much effort around emotional intelligence building skills, because the reality is a lot of people, and perhaps a lot of people that are watching, are not choosing emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be very raw with you in that there are many people that are choosing not to lean into their own emotional bodies. Their emotional bodies have become very one-sided and not multidimensional. And when we're talking about the human experience, it's about being a multidimensional being whose personality is being given the space to express itself, right? It's when we're suppressing parts of our emotions where we start to, I believe, become less sensitive to the reality of the social engagement nerve, which is here to bring about cohesive collaboration community, right? If you, for example, if you as a couple, you as a single, want to develop and have a community, be part of a community, see a different earth, see a new kind of people around you, it's going to come from understanding this core aspect of the human experience, which is understanding your emotions. Because honestly, and I'm curious your thoughts here, the people I trust the most are the people that are willing to put the effort into their own emotional intelligence journey, and they're willing to show me their emotions. Because emotions are the most raw form of pure life force.
In a healthy way, yeah.
In a healthy way, of course.
In a healthy, non-destructive way.
Right, exactly. And that's very important.
The example you brought up early in this conversation, the child. They don't withhold their emotions. They throw a tantrum. They let it out. And then 2 seconds later, it's gone. It's out of their body and they can go back to... Animals do this too.
Yeah.
You know? Rather than bottling it up, rather than hiding it. And I think you hit the nail on the head. This is how trust is built. Make sure it's not an attack on the other person. Make sure the person knows it's not about them. Or, you know, if it is about them, that you're clear why. But like, let the emotion out, because you said it. Emotions are messengers, you guys. They're there for a reason. If you try to suppress it, it's going to come back again and again and again and again. The way to dismiss a messenger is to hear the message. What are you trying to convey to me, anger? What are you trying to make me aware of? Is there an unmet need? Oh, what is the unmet need? Right? Am I hungry? Am I not being heard? Is there a fear that my needs won't be met at some point in the future? Like, what is the message? What is the cause of the emotion? Feel it, process it, understand it, and then come back to love, whether it's love of the other person or love of yourself. I want to again go back to that definition that we opened this episode with. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, use, and manage your emotions in positive ways. Even the so-called negative emotions. Do they help you understand something? You see? Are you managing them effectively? Not suppressing them. Very different things.
I read a quote this past week and it helped formulate like a new quote for myself. But it's been around, for example, the energy of nostalgia and what nostalgia represents and how it can help someone heal in their journey. And it reminds me of, for example, going to movies lately. We've been going to Disney movies. We went to see Lilo and Stitch, and it was like so cute, and yet it made me cry. And we were both crying. And I think there was a part of me that was like, oh, our inner child is crying, so cute. Like, I love my inner child. Then I saw a quote like I think a day later, and it happened to just be the most potent awakening moment, a reminder that like this person was basically expressing, why is it that we are constantly thinking like crying's an inner child thing? And that really hit me because like, oh, I have so adopted that. And where did that come from? And then I had this like different, deeper thought of like, when reading this person's quote, that adults get to cry. And it was just really, the way that it was worded was so beautiful, because I consider myself a professional crier and I've constantly thought it's my inner child. But it made me realize this, that like actually being an adult, a healthy adult, is being able to feel your emotions. If you're numb, you're not feeling your emotions. That is a greater danger, I feel, not only to your life, but to others around you. Because if you are numb, if you're shut off from parts of your own humanity, if you are shutting off joy and all you feel is anger, if you're shutting off anger and only feeling another, like in the broad spectrum of emotion, that is doing a disservice to your own I feel like wholeness journey, because I feel like the most deep poets, deep philosophers of our time, it is required that you are in touch with these parts of you, that you get to the root of emotions, because the emotions themselves are the messengers to the keys, the diamonds of wisdom that can little propel you into a creative creation. The reason why I feel like we're in a precipice of time where like there's not a multidimensionality wholeness amongst the collective conscious of emotion right now is because there is a war against you feeling your feelings. There are energies at play that don't want you to be liberated. There are forces that don't want you to feel joy. They don't want you to feel pleasure. They don't want you to feel ecstasy.
They don't want you empowered to make choices.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Remember what disempowerment looks like when you're acting on reflex, when you don't make that conscious choice. And you're absolutely right. Speaking into trust, the people that I'm uneasy about or around are the people that I can't read, that I can't tell what they're feeling, that I can't tell what their motivation is, what their desired outcome is. That's when I get uneasy.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody's raw and real and vulnerable, it's much easier to build that trust.
Yeah, it's that social engagement nerve that helps diffuse some of those emotions. For example, if you've been feeling anxiety, being amongst people that reveal and showcase you empathy, love, presence, it diffuses the need for your liver, for example, to go into anger, right? And so it's really important for that social engagement.
It's interesting that you keep coming back to the liver as the source of anger.
I've been studying it because I've dealt with my fair share of anger, especially in this time. It's like, yeah.
Well, the stereotype of the angry drunk, for example.
Oh,
they're fine till they start drinking, right? But the moment they start drinking, the anger comes out. Where does alcohol go?
Right.
Straight to the liver.
Yeah. Because it needs
I wonder if there's a connection.
Well, yeah, I've been really interested in Chinese medicine because I recognize, even with my tools, I feel like herbs, medicine is really essential. I've been taking a fascination for it because I think it's important for me, especially in this time, to understand from the inside out freedom, right? Knowing, because for example, I have dealt with bloating and some constipation, especially during certain parts of my menstrual cycle. And I've been really curious as to why. So I'm leaning into how this perhaps is even connected to the liver. Because I deal with like PMDDs to a degree, and some of the symptoms there. So yeah, it's really important to me. I think with the example you gave, I think if people became more curious about where these emotions come from, it would be really powerful to lean into.
Well, it comes back to knowing thyself. It really comes back to knowing thyself. That's why it's called emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? Understanding, using and managing emotions.
Yeah.
That's what emotional intelligence is. And you touch on a good point, by the way, too. As relationship coaches and relationship counselors, I think one of my biggest regrets is people wait to come to us until things are really, really, really bad. And now they're in a crisis mode and they want us to solve it overnight in a session or two, right? Why wait till your relationship's in crisis? Why wait until you're on the last leg trying to decide if it's even worth staying with each other? You know, like in athletics, the top athletes have coaches. You could argue that they are top athletes. They are where they are because they have coaches. So why wouldn't we apply the same thing in our relationship? An athlete doesn't wait till they have an injury to get a coach. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
We wait till the relationship's falling apart to start studying this stuff. why not, if you're with somebody you really, really love and you're envisioning a future together, like whether it's hiring coaches like us or simply getting a book on the subject, doing some reading online, why not from the very beginning of the relationship invest in having an emotionally mature, emotionally intelligent relationship rather than waiting till the problems show up?
Like this one. Self-care for adult children of emotionally mature parents.
Hey.
Honor your emotions, nurture yourself, and live with confidence by 𝗧𝘂𝗸𝗲𝗓. She's a psychologist. I got this years ago from Intuition.
I'll put the Amazon link in the below the show description for you guys. Really great book. Not only in healing from how you were brought up, but I find the book very, very informative so you don't become an emotionally lacking parent, right? Break that cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the black sheep of my family, liberator, phoenix rising. But yeah, it's, reading this book came at such a perfect time, but it's helped me understand self-compassion even more, because I've also recognized that it's helped me become more attuned to what kind of world I want to create for myself. And that also comes from self-accountability. And even if, for example, people in my birth family, for example, did not display to me emotionally mature actions, I truly believe I'm responsible for my reality right now. And that is my legacy, to work through difficult emotions sometimes and not suppress or avoid. And I know what it's like to see that, to be around people like that. I've suppressed emotions myself. And so it's really just a walk home, a remembrance journey. And I can give honor where it's due, of like, because of relationship with someone as intelligent as you, with the background that you have, even before I met you, in moments where I didn't even know how to process my own grief. I mean, I processed my grief and learned how to be essentially a grief doula of my own journey. But like, I was able to acknowledge in a deeper way through relationship with you, like, oh my goodness, like, the heart truly holds on to grief. I mean, that was like the first few years of our relationship. I don't hold as much grief, I feel, as much. I mean, I grieve.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And right back at you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being such an amazing mirror and such an amazing teacher.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, I can even think about when we did our psychedelic journeys and opened up through MDMA as well, and how that really catalyzed some of my healing journey around grief, and just tapping into that
How
one.
so?
It just cracked me open. It made me realize how lacking I felt around the heart, and feeling through that. Yeah. I just saw the power of the heart chakra, and how relationship with you has opened it up very much so. But yeah, that could be another conversation for another time. But
it will be. I think that's an episode waiting to happen.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Psychedelics can be extremely powerful tools for self-awareness and for healing.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think actually deserve a whole episode of their own. Quite a deep topic. So yeah, you guys, if you need any assistance at all in your communication, in your relationship, in your understanding of yourself or another, and that may be in a romantic relationship, that may be in a business relationship. I've done a lot of coaching for corporate teams, for example. Whatever relationship you're trying to navigate, even the relationship with yourself, your relationship with money, if you need help, please reach out. You can find Kendall at at the Tantric Mystic _ on Instagram, probably best way to
Mm-hmm.
reach out to you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at Andre Knight Awakening. And you can also find us at tantricawakening.net. There's a form you can fill out to join our mailing list or to reach out and ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
And just reach out. We have all sorts of tools at our disposal that we can use to help you out. Kendall can do a birth chart for you, astrology birth chart. She can do a transit chart to see where you're at now. She can even do a composite chart for you and any person or relationship, romantic or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. You did
Yeah.
one for our company, even. Like, it can be a non-person entity.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship coaching. I can help you with hypnotherapy if there's some wounds or blocks or limiting beliefs from the past that need to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
There are people like us waiting and ready to assist you.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And I also wanted to mention like the depth to which you even ask for help, right? In receiving help. It, especially when it comes to emotions, and especially for those of you who are here leaning into Tantra, wanting to lean into like erotic experiences, expanding your erotic palette, like a core shadow of eroticism is emotions, like being able to alchemize any fears, any disconnect, any trauma responses into emotional intelligence, because that emotional intelligence is going to go a long way, especially when it comes to experiences you have not only with yourself, but also a significant other, or in public experiences where you might be with other people around sacred life force energy. So I definitely just wanted to share that in conclusion. Yeah.
Well, some of those environments, I mean, that's where some of our deepest, strongest emotions and most buried shadows tend to come up.
Yeah.
And shadows, by the way, when we speak about shadows, this isn't like Star Wars, like the dark side. What we mean when we say shadow, it's the parts of yourself that have not had any light shined on them. It's the parts that you've buried. And now you're bringing them to your conscious awareness, whereas before they were acting on you unconsciously. That's what it means to meet your shadow self. And there's no better way than a really, really effective mirror. Frankly, that is the sacred gift of relationship, is that you will learn things about yourself you didn't even know as a result of a good relationship.
Absolutely. And it's truly an honor to hold space for people, women, men, couples, as they feel and they are given the space to put words to what they're feeling and the sensitivity that requires. I'm so honored to do that with you together, but also individually as well, because
Likewise.
I'm so passionate about it. It's like, it's beautiful because we all are worthy of being held in that and being able to receive that. And even if you didn't experience that at a younger time or in a prior relationship, like you get to, and that's what, as a priestess, for example, I have such a passion about it because I understand too, like the vulnerability. I think about like when we're in pleasure with our lovers, whatever, like that's emotional. It's emotional.
That's emotion too.
It's emotion. And to be able to witness like your emotion too. Like when I witness myself and my emotions on the pleasure journey, and like all of it's just beautiful. And all to say, it's been a pleasure to connect with everyone today. And
it has, and it's been a pleasure to connect with you as well, beloved.
Yeah, likewise.
Gosh, so much more to talk about. It feels like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Reach out, www.tantricawakening.net, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. Make sure to subscribe, and whatever platform you're on, please leave us a review. It really helps us in the podcast reach more people. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Bye for now. Share this with someone you love.